today I've got a Leither Co. box to unbox that I have not opened up yet. It's still sealed, so I don't even know what's in here yet. And then I decided that I was going to try out this Bernat Elise Blanket EZ, which is a loop style yarn. It's pretty much the same as any of the other loop style yarns. Somebody's got one called Loop It, and there's a bunch of different ones, but they're super popular right now. I keep seeing the stores just totally flooded with all the different colors and the different brands and everything, and they're all basically the same thing. So I decided I would give it a try. I've never actually used this stuff. I looked at a couple of patterns, and I've got a little booklet that I picked up at Joann Fabric that is Baby Loops and Twists by Leisure Arts. There is a really pretty baby blanket in here that I don't think I'm going to be able to show real clearly. But there's this really pretty baby blanket in here that has like a, yeah, if I put it over on this camera, you might be able to see it a little bit better. So it's all pearls in the center, and then it's got like a crisscross border that you can't see real well in this picture. You can probably see it better in this picture, actually, on the back side here. So it's got like a crisscross border. That seemed like a little bit too much to take on during a live stream, like while answering questions and talking about other things. So I'm just going to do a really basic knit blanket. I've got one ball opened up over here, and I've already counted out the 50 loops that I need to start the blanket off. So I'm going to work on that and see what I think of working with this loop style yarn. And then mostly tonight is going to be about your questions and whatever you guys want to talk about. I try and have some sort of topic, and so we'll unbox the Leither Co. box to start with, and then whatever you guys want to talk about. If you have crochet questions, if you have yarn questions, you let me know what you want to see. Real quick, I was just going to give you some stats on this Bernat blanket yarn. I've gone over this before, but for those of you who haven't seen it, this is a number 7 jumbo yarn. It is 6.4 ounce ball or 180 grams. And for that, you get 18 yards or 16 meters, which is not a whole lot. It's 100% polyester. There's no hook size or anything because it's not intended to use with a hook. It's saying that your gauge is 4 inches for 5 loops. So, you can get quite a bit of yardage out of a handful of loops, though. So, I'm going to set that to just off to the side, and we're going to open up this Leither Co. box, and then we'll go back to that. So, how's everyone doing tonight? Sorry about the audio issues. I think that they're resolved based on the comments. Welcome to everybody who's commenting, and thank you all for letting us know right away that the audio was off. I saw there were 2 or 3 comments that just saying like, hey, the audio is a problem. So that helps us a lot to know that something's going wrong and we can fix it faster so that you're not listening to me sound like I'm underwater. All right, so opening up this Leither Co. box. It's got pretty, I'm going to try and not block my face here. It's got pretty paper in here, as per usual. Open this guy up. Ooh. This is a really pretty orange and brown. Really, really nice fall color. Let me move this out of the way and get that so you can see. So really pretty color. It's called Autumn. It is a sock yarn. It's 100% superwash merino, 400 yards, 100 gram ball. And with that, the pattern that it came with, so there is a shawl pattern, and then it also looks like there's a couple of cute little leaf earrings. So they're pretty little earrings. They probably only take up a couple of yards of fabric. And I would bet, knowing Leither Co., that the earring pieces are in this little bag, and they are. So there is the little pieces to make the earrings. Back this up a little bit so that you can see these guys. So they're just the dangly earring style jewelry. And then it looks like there's a cute little bracelet here. It's got a leaf on it, and then some wooden beads and some charcoal, maybe? I don't know. They're like black, and they have a little bit of a tacky feeling to them, but like not sticky. And then the hook is really pretty. It is a 3.75 millimeter hook. So it's really nice looking. So, and that's it for this box. So, every one of these boxes comes with a ball of yarn, a pattern, and recently it's been 2 patterns, a hook, and then a little gift. So, the little gift this time is this bracelet, which is pretty cute. The pattern generally seems to come with all of the pieces that you need to finish it. So, like, one time it was like a little stuffed, like, I think it was a llama head and arms to, like, attach to a lovey. And so it came with the stuffing. It came with a contrast thread to do the eyes, and, like, the nose detail, I think. And then all the yarn and the pattern to, like, finish it out. It also came with the, it came with the contrast to do the nose, and then there were, safety eyes to do the eyes, if I remember correctly. So it's all about, getting you all the pieces to work on the pattern. Someone asked what the price point is. So I think the monthly box for everything is $40 per month. I believe that's shipped. I could be wrong on that, but it's about that price. So I think it's $40 shipped. It is, I don't know, I think a reasonably good deal. So if you think about what indie yarn costs, I would say ballpark on hand-dyed indie yarn is usually about $26 100 grams. More or less depending on the dyer and depending on the fiber content and all of that, but about $26. The hook is probably easily worth $10 to $15. They're hand-turned hooks. And then patterns are worth a few dollars a piece. She's been generally including 2 in every box. And then, of course, you get the little gift and any of the little pieces that you need to turn the patterns into finished projects. So, I don't know. I think it's a pretty good deal if you've got the extra bandwidth or like extra spending ability, and you want to kind of have a surprise thing come in the mail every week. So, or not every week, every month. Sorry. So I've had fun just unboxing them. I like surprises. I actually haven't really used many of the patterns. I've been a little bit underwater, literally and figuratively. So, like I mentioned last week, the basement flooding sort of derailed my whole, like, plans to film and everything for several weeks. And obviously derailed the stream for a couple of weeks. So I just really didn't get much crocheting done in that time. And then just between the stream and work and doing the projects that I want to do and then filming any other videos that we put out, I just haven't done as much crocheting for myself as I did in the past.
You did make one of the hats though or something, right?
No.
What did you use it for? Making an animal?
No, I haven't used any of it. My husband's saying he thought I made a hat. I think
One of the Leither yarns or something. Pretty sure.
I think I was going to, but I didn't. So, Stephanie's saying that she loves all the autumn stuff and wishes she wasn't in Florida. I think you will not mind next week because supposedly the temperatures are supposed to like bottom out here for Halloween. So I think it's going to be a very, very cold week next week based on what they're forecasting. So you'll probably enjoy Florida a lot more than we'll be enjoying Central Illinois here.
So Shalene wanted to get your initial thoughts on the loop yarn, I think.
Oh, Shalene was asking.
And she said, it seems like you're not excited.
Oh, she was saying that I wasn't excited for the loops yarn. I don't know. So let's get into that. I'm gonna put the Leither Co stuff back.
You want to get started first.
Oh, that's right. So, okay, before we get into the loops yarn, let me close this up so I'm not crinkling and talking. Before we get into the loop yarn, so last week I showed some projects that I was working on that were going to be birthday presents for a friend of, kids of a friend of mine. So they turned 8 yesterday. I gave them their birthday presents, but we did take pictures so that I could share all of the finished projects with you. So they each got a crochet edge blanket, a pillowcase that I sewed together, and a crocheted scarf. So I'm going to go through the pictures here. The first up, I think, are the Ravenclaw scarf. You probably have seen these. This is the one that I did the review of the Must Be Merino yarn. And so I did this in the navy blue and the silver and added tassels and trimmed those up nice. And this was done in the Marguerite stitch. And so I really like the way this one turned out. It had a weird amount of skew from the Marguerite stitch, but yeah, I think it still turned out really cool. It just has sort of an angle, like each side comes to sort of a point instead of laying flat across.
You can kind of see it there.
Yeah, you can see it a little bit. Okay, so this is the pillowcase. This is a 3-seam pillowcase. You lay everything out nice and neat on top of each other. You run one seam down the whole thing, and then you do this like weird turn it all inside out. You sew wrong sides together. So the right side facing, you sew all the way around the outside, and then you flip it inside out and sew it again on the same seam. And what that does is tucks all of your edges into the center. And then they can't fray and act all weird on you, and they just turn out really nice. So they're pretty simple to do. I think I did them in about 2 hours, and that was for both pillowcases. I also, while I was working on the crochet edge blanket, so it's really, really easy to do a single layer crochet edge blanket. To do a double layer one, you have to get the fabric to lay still and not shift back and forth while you cut the holes. So you can't really do it on a table that's undersized. You need either a gigantic dining room table or a really big craft table. I have a pretty big cutting table, and that still isn't really big enough to do like a twin size blanket. And so you can see here, that's one of the crochet edge blankets. I don't know if I love the way this one turned out. I was aiming for trying to get like a Deathly Hallows type of look to the edge. For those of you who haven't read the book, Deathly Hallows symbol is a triangle with a circle in the middle and a line down the center. And I tried to crochet that, and it more or less turned out, but didn't really stay the way I wanted it to. So some people were saying that it looked, because it's a Ravenclaw blanket, it also looked like the lost diadem of Ravenclaw. And so I just kind of went with it, and it turned out okay, but I really like the border on the other blanket better. So those are some more of the pictures. But anyway, what I was saying was that the pillowcases took me a couple hours, but part of that was because I had left all of my my rotary cutter and all of my cutting mats. So I actually had to cut all of the fabric using just a pair of scissors and a measuring tape. So it was an interesting experience. I usually have a a cutting mat laid out, and I can just zip through all of my cuts. And so this took me a little bit longer. So that was the first set of pictures. This next one that was for one kid. This is for the second kid. She really likes the Fantastic Beasts. Actually, she's been really attached to the illustrated book, which is pretty cool. So this was a Fantastic Beasts pillowcase to go in her new Harry Potter room. Couple more views of that. And then, this is the edge of a Harry Potter blanket. Hers has all of the different house crests for the Harry Potter stuff. And I actually used the Bernat, Lion Brand Velux around the edge of this. So I made a small scarf, and then I used the rest of that ball plus a little bit more from a new ball, and did the whole outside in the Velux, and it just looked really nice. It was a really good gold color against the red background for kind of a Gryffindor look to it, but it ended up looking really nice. So I used the Harry Potter fabric is from Joann Fabric, and then the backing fabric is also from Joann out of their Luxe line, which is a little bit more expensive, but I caught it on a really good sale. I was there and it was 60% off, and so it was more than I wanted to spend, but it feels so nice by comparison. So, and then I think there's one more scarf left to show. And so I did this. This is also in Must Be Merino, but I did this with the burgundy and the gold colors. And I did a ripple stitch on here, just a real basic ripple stitch, just to give it something interesting. On this one, I did even stripes instead of thick and thin. So, you guys are commenting tons. That's great. Let me try and flip through some of these. Shalene said, I got it all done, and that I rule. Yeah, so I was working, I think, until Sunday night. So party was yesterday, and I think I worked up till Sunday night and got everything done. But yeah, I did get it all done. So, and they really loved it. Vicky and Stephanie commenting that they love the Harry Potter things. Yeah, there's Vicky saying that she loves crocheting Harry Potter things. There's a designer whose name I'm not remembering right now. It'll come to me. She makes really cool, like, pillow dolls. I don't really know how to describe what they are. They're sort of amigurumi. They're about yay tall, and she has them in a bunch of the Harry Potter characters, and I've considered doing something with a few of her patterns. I think she's got 9 out right now. But they're really cool. And I've that might be my next Harry Potter crochet project. So yeah. So, and then let's see. Anish Norge says beautiful work. Shalene likes the projects. Yeah, and yeah, somebody says very interesting. So, yeah, that's sort of just a project update there. And yeah, I don't know. I thought you guys might like to see some of those finished projects. I apologize that I don't have them here to, like, show off to you and, you know, move around and whatnot. But since their birthday was yesterday, that they already have them in their new Harry Potter room. So, it's sort of my season of Harry Potter things right now. I've been working on those projects, and, they had their room redone and Harry Potter stuff, and then I'm going to the symphony this weekend. Has, they're doing a series that is being done all over the country. So, like, this is not unique to the area, but they play the movie with no soundtrack and no, like, backing music whatsoever. And then the symphony plays live the entire soundtrack. And so it's pretty cool to just sit and watch, you think about like going to the symphony and they play a song and then there's kind of a lull, and they play a song and there's kind of a lull. And this, they have to like keep timing with the movie, and there can't be any lull or like lack of music because they're literally playing the whole movie, no soundtrack. And so it's not like they have to keep up and they have to keep their pacing, and it has to work out. And it's really kind of a cool thing. And I went last year, they played the first Harry Potter movie, and then this year, they are doing the second one. And so, should be interesting. But, Shalene's asking, besides the loop yarn, what am I planning on doing now? That is a good question. So I have the hat that I showed last week, the Red Heart Roll With It melange. I'm working on a herringbone spiral hat. I just need to do the reduction on the hat. So the brim and, I don't know, the first like 7 inches or so are done. And I need to start decreasing and put a pom-pom on that. So that should really be done like tonight or tomorrow. And then I'm going to work with this loop it yarn. And then I'm not sure. I need to go over to my board and see where I am at. I know a couple of people have asked for a tutorial on beading. There's a tutorial that I want to do on mosaic crochet. I know Stephanie has asked to see basket weave and the other one. I can't think of. It's basket weave and no, I can't think of it. She might comment in with it. I can picture the stitch, but it's not coming to me. But anyway, I've got a whole lot of things that people want to see. I've been working on a basket weave pillow, so that one might be the first to video for you guys. As far as other things that I'm working on, I have 2 more blankets that I want to work on with a crochet edge. So I need to get those cut and started. Those really only take me, I don't know, about a day and a half of working on them while watching movies. So they're a really nice weekend project for me. So waffle stitch, Stephanie commented in. Maybe that's what I think that's what I'm making the pillow with now that I think of it. The basket weave I was going to save and do the men's scarf with, but I actually have to go back and buy a single ball of yarn because the men's scarf was one of the only balls of yarn. I bought the Lion Brand Thick and Quick, and that was one of the only balls of yarn that was on the floor that I lost in the basement flood. So, Shalene said she's going to try beads with crochet. I really love beading with crochet. I've shown some quick tutorials on stream and whatnot with beading, and I've got a pile of beads back here that I've picked up at different like trade shows and yarn shows and whatnot. And I don't know, I really like it. It does take a little bit of work, but it really turns out nice. Anna Schnorch said that her daughter and daughter's boyfriend have been to the symphony that I was mentioning and loved it. Yeah, they're doing it all over the place. I know St. Louis is a couple of years ahead, meaning that I think they're on like the 5th or 6th movie, and I'm only getting to the 2nd one here, but I know that they're doing it probably a dozen or so symphonies that around the area that I know are doing it. Shalene's saying, is it something she can find to watch? I don't think anybody has broadcast it to my knowledge. It's something that the symphonies are doing live that, I mean, basically they're just playing the movie. So like, it's just the regular movie. And then they're doing the soundtrack live. So it would be, it's not substantially different than just watching the movie because it has a soundtrack. But it's sort of the experience of going to a symphony and then seeing them play. So I don't know legally how they would rebroadcast that. I guess whoever owns the rights would have to like pay to play the movie like again. So She meant beading with crochet, not the live. I was confused. It was live, but you can go back and rewatch live videos. So, we might be able to find the actual video that I did the little quick beading tutorial in. Or I can pull beads out and show it real quick again. Just sort of a basic tutorial. The one thing that I would recommend is that if you're going to try beading, I would not pre-string your beads. So a lot of places will say string all of the beads on, and then you slide them up into the stitches, and I hate that. It really just takes forever to string them on, and then I think they rough up the yarn too much, as like you slide them all down and then you have to slide them back up, and I don't know. I felt like it was a kind of a mess. So
Do you want to just go over beading quick and just show the beetle needle again?
yeah, I can just go back over doing some beading. Let's just pull this out real quick.
Do you need me to find the yarn or something?
I just need any ball of fingering weight yarn. There's probably something around. Probably in one of the bags on the wall, there's probably a ball of something. So, let's see what we got here. That'll do it. All right, this is going to be kind of a loud yarn, but it's pretty anyway. All right, one of you cannot be attached here. They both... Oh, you know what? This one might actually... No, okay. There was one project I was working on that I did need both balls active. So, okay. So I've got fingering weight yarn here and an E-hook. And so I'll just show you real quick here as far as beading goes. So if you're following a pattern, I'll show you here. I'm going to try and just crochet a little bit. If you're following a pattern, it'll tell you where to place beads. If you're placing your beads rather than stringing them, it does actually get a little bit easier because it doesn't matter whether it's front side or back side. So if you're sliding beads, you have to do it in such a way that they show on the correct side, and then they'll only show on one side and not the other. And I'll show you why that is in a second. But if you're going to place beads, let me get a single crochet row going here. And don't worry about hogging the time. This is the stuff that I like to do. So if people have questions, it's so much easier for me to just do a thing live and show real quick than it is to try and come up with a topic and just hope people are interested. Which is sort of where the Loop It yarn is. So if people are interested in that, I absolutely will still get to that. But that was more of me just thinking, okay, well, what can I do on stream so that I'm not just babbling? And that's something that I've wanted to try out. And so it was just what got put on the topic for tonight. But I am happy to answer questions. I shouldn't have chained so many. I'm probably going to turn this around and just work it as a short row.
While you do that, Michelle wants to know the size of the beads.
Michelle's asking the size of the beads. These are 6/0 beads. So, beads are similar to wire. So the bigger the number in front of the 0, the smaller the beads. So 6/0 beads are the right size for fingering weight yarn. I'm going to try and find something that, like, contrasts with this yarn so that you can see the beads. Most of my beads blend with this yarn pretty strongly. We'll go with these dark ones. And I usually have some sort of dish within arm's reach. Oh, you know what? There's some copper beads here that should show up really well against this yarn. So this thing here that I have, which might be a little bit difficult to see because it's just like a wire, but this is a beetle needle. I have a beetle needle that has a bend in it. You can get them just straight. And they've got a little taper here on the end and a teeny tiny hook right here. And so you can get these in a 1mm or a 0.8mm variety. The 1mm is for 6/0 beads, and they are for fingering weight yarn. The 0.8 is for 8/0 beads for lace weight yarn. Shalene's saying that it's hard to find beads with large holes. So if you're beading like worsted weight yarn, then you're going to be looking for pretty big beads. But if you bead like a fingering weight yarn or something like that, then 6/0 beads are not terribly difficult to find. I generally can find them pretty readily online, and then Joann Fabric usually has an okay selection. Not always the colors I want. But it really depends on the size of the yarn that you're looking for. This technique can also, that I'm going to show with the beetle needle, can also be done with crochet hook. You just need pretty fine crochet hooks. So generally they're called steel hooks, and they get down to like below 1mm hook size, and those will work just fine for this. And in fact, if you're using big enough beads and big enough yarn, something like a 3.5mm or a 2.5mm might be large enough to bead. So I'm going to show you real quick here. I'm just going to turn this row back and work back. So say that this is the stitch that I want to work into. I'm going to try and show this the best I can here. What you do is you start your... Okay. You start your stitch, and you pull up a loop, and then you take your crochet hook out. And normally I would load this completely up with beads so that they're all ready and waiting. But I don't have the little ends on this beetle needle for some reason. So you take your crochet hook out, you put it in the loop, and then you have to get the loop caught in the little hook on the end, and you slide the bead up and over and onto the stitch. And then you can take your crochet hook, put it back in, fix your loop, and finish your stitch. And so that's just a single crochet. And so I'll bead one more in here. Let me get a little space between them. So
You have little steel hooks?
I'm going to draw up a loop. I do. They are upstairs in my hook box, and I don't... I think it's in my backpack.
I can go get a steel hook and you can try that too.
Yeah, I can show that.
For people who don't have a beetle needle.
Yeah. Alright, so I'm going to slide this onto the loop. So just pick your loop back up and slide it down to the hook, and then slide the bead up and over. And again, the beetle needle goes faster usually because this whole thing is full of beads. And so it'll slide up and over, and you can just keep loading and loading and loading more beads. So I'm going to go back here, pick my loops back up, and then finish my stitch. And so what you can see here is that the beads they're not cooperating fully right now, but the beads will show through on both sides, especially if you block this. Single crochets are a little bit harder to see beads than double crochets, but you can see that the beads would be visible on both sides. The other thing is, because I'm putting it over the loop, so if I pull this back out, there's two pieces of yarn underneath this bead holding the weight of the bead, because beads weigh kind of a lot in comparison to yarn. So you've got two pieces of yarn holding the bead up. And so when you finish it, it has a little bit more structure. And my husband ran upstairs to grab my crochet hooks if he can find them, which he might not be able to because they're in my backpack. But if he can find my steel hooks, then I'll show you with steel hooks as well. But yeah, any bead that fits comfortably on the yarn, you can use. But like I said, 6/0 beads are generally for 6/0 beads are generally for fingering weight yarn, and 8/0 beads are generally for lace weight yarn. Sorry, I had to get that out of here. All right, let's see. I think Stephanie said a 0.6 millimeter is what she used. I want to see how big I can go and still get these on here.
I was going to link the beadle needle. Which one? 0.8 hooked?
I would go 1 hooked is what I'm using right now. So this is a 1 millimeter steel hook that I've got up here. If you want to go back to the close view. So this is a 1 millimeter steel hook. This is my 1 millimeter beadle needle. They're similarly sized. This actually might be a 0.8 millimeter now that I'm looking at the difference in size here, but close enough. What you want here is, it's important that the bead fits on the needle, but it's also important that the hook is big enough that it doesn't split your yarn. So if you get into hooks that are too tiny for the yarn, what you'll end up doing is pulling up like fibers off of the yarn. So let me show you what I mean here. Let me find a much tinier hook. What do I got here? It's a 1.25. It's a 0.9. Where's my 0.6? My 0.6 might be in a project bag. Here's a 0.75. So if you use a yarn that's or a hook that's too tiny, so if I just grab on one bead here, and go to slide it onto this loop, you can see, hopefully.
I can zoom way in if you want.
Yeah, if you want, he's gonna zoom in real quick so you can see what I'm talking about here. And I'm gonna grab a bigger yarn.
I kind of need you to hold it where it's gonna be.
Yep. So give me 1 second. We're going to zoom in so that you can see this a little bit more closely so you can see the end of the hook. And I'll do my best to stay on camera, but it's going to get trickier as we're zoomed in really far. So this 0.75 is still big enough to catch all of the yarn in the throat of the hook. So hopefully you can see that as I slide down, like it's catching all of the yarn. But if I was using something just slightly thicker, make a loop here. If I was using something slightly thicker where it wants it, did you see the one ply jump off the end there? Let me show you one more time. It jumped pretty readily.
I need to move up and down just a tiny bit to make sure it's in focus.
Okay. So I've got this loop here that I want to use, and it's trying, like, that ply just wants to jump right off the end there because nothing's holding onto it. And so now you can see, like, all of my plies are split here, and it's going to make for really difficult crochet work. And you won't be able to get that bead really. You can sort of get it up and over. That one went on okay. And so, like, you could use a 6/0 bead. I think this is like a number 3 yarn. But you would be much better off doing it with the largest hook the bead will fit on. So give me 1 second and I will, that's too big. Here's a 1.25. And the bead still fits on here. So if we go to a 1.25, I'll make a new knot here. You have a much easier time catching that yarn. So, like, I can catch all of that yarn and it doesn't want to jump the hook as much. And then I should be able, It's a little harder to get that bead to turn the corner there. But you can still get that bead on there. So if you're going to use beads on a larger yarn, you might be better off doing it with a crochet hook. If you're going to be using fingering weight and you're going to be doing a lot of beading, I really like the beetle needle. Especially, like I said, because you can preload all of these beads. And when they're this small, you can get like 30 or 40 of them preloaded on here. And then you're not picking up and constantly trying to, put one bead on, one bead. So, and then these you can kind of just, you sit and you sort of preload a few of them. It goes pretty quickly. You can, of course, pre-string your beads, and I'll show you why I don't like to do that real quick. One, because I just found it completely, I guess, what is the word that I want? Just irritating. It just wasn't really any fun to sit and string them and try and count them for me. Let's see, there's a couple here. Let's see. A couple people said thank you. Shalene, let's see, Joyce said thank you. And then Shalene said, she's got 2 going, 3 lightweight and the other lace weight. So yeah, you could probably use the same size beads based on what I just showed you. But I would use different size hooks. With shawl and a ball, what would I recommend for bead and needle size? Shawl and a ball runs kind of thin, from what they actually say it is. I don't know if, I assume that if beads come in a 6/0 and a 8/0, that there's probably such a thing as like a 4/0. But it looks like you probably could get away with 6/0 beads if you didn't mind them being a little bit small. But I assume that there are other sizes of beads. You'd probably want to go just slightly larger. And then the needle size, the beetle needle only comes in a 1 or an 8. You probably could use, a 1 or a 0.8 millimeter. You probably could get away with the 1, but I would almost think that you'd be better off going with a steel hook, and just loading a couple beads at a time. You could give the 1 millimeter a try, but because shawl and a ball has so much hair on it, one of the things that isn't really easy to show on the beetle needle is that it's really sharp. And has kind of like an aggressive little hook right here. It's kind of, so this is a really, really like sharp little hook here. And it's very good for what it's doing, but it also has a tendency to grab onto the yarn. And if it's a little bit too small for the yarn you're using, it will split the plies pretty readily. So, it's interesting. Stephanie's saying that her 6/0 beads didn't fit on any hook bigger than a 0.6. I wonder if the shape of the head on your hook was different than mine. I could see that. So the important part on a steel crochet hook or any crochet hook is that this part here is the right size, and that's what you're going to size your loops on. But if your head was a little bit thicker or taller, I could see it still being a 0.6 millimeter and your bead's not fitting. But 6/0 beads should all be the same size-ish, and have the same hole size. So that's interesting to know that doesn't,
Do you not have any 6/0 beads?
these are 6/0 beads. That's what I'm saying. Like, she's saying that they didn't fit. So I'm wondering if they were mislabeled and actually 8/0 beads, or I don't have 8/0 beads, or if her hook is just a slightly different shape than mine. But I could get my 6/0 all the way onto a 1.25. And then Shalene's saying the steel crochet hooks have caps. Yeah, so these are Clover Amour steel hooks, and mine all do have caps to protect the little because they're teeny tiny crochet hooks that the cap goes on and like hooks to this base here. It's just kind of a pressure fit cap, but it protects them from getting the little hooks like chopped off on the end. So hopefully that. Oh, I was gonna show pre-stringing real fast if I've got a this guy. So for pre-stringing, I came across these. I actually got them as part of a gift exchange one time, and then I've bought them since. I got a knot in that I cannot get out. I'm just gonna snip this couple inches off here. But I came across these little tiny needles when in a gift exchange. These are Susan Bates needles, and they're... That's fine. I'm going to show them in a little bit closer. But these are Susan Bates needles, and they're just like pointy on both ends, and they're plastic, and they flex open. So they're just a pointy little guy. They come in a 5 or 6 pack with different sizes for different size yarns. But they're really good for stringing beads because they flex. So you can stick the yarn through here, no problem. And then, then you can get the beads on here. So, maybe there was one size smaller that I used because these are not going over this. All right, I lied. I was pretty sure that this is what I used to string these last time, and apparently they don't want to go on there. And my set of needles is not in here. Maybe it's over here? I need like a sewing needle. Well, anyway. The downside to pre-stringing is that you have to place the beads so that they only show on one particular side. So you have to pay attention to what row you're in and where your beads are at. And they just don't want, yeah. So they just, I don't know. It just seemed like it added an extra level of complexity to me. You have to string them all on, and then you pull them up, and you have to remember which side of the fabric you're on so you know which way to string the bead. Tons and tons of people do it. It works perfectly fine. I just found it to be a little bit tedious. So, let's see. Stephanie's saying that she thinks her hook might be thicker. Okay, so she thinks that the throat of her hook doesn't last very long, and so probably her bead didn't fit on the end there. And a thank you from Shalene saying that the quick tutorial helped, so that's great. You'll have to let me know how beading actually goes. It's a lot easier to show it real quick, and I don't know if that ends up being helpful, but dental flossers would work like the needle blue loop. Huh. I'm not picturing... Michelle's saying that dental flossers would work like that needle, the blue loop. I think she's talking about like cleaning apparatus for braces, but I never had braces, so I'm not familiar with flossers, but I think I can picture in the store what you're talking about. Like there's like a little blue loop that they use for cleaning gum brand dental flossers. So that's good to know. That's a alternate technique for getting yarn. I use a... Do I have the little thing? Yeah, it's stuck in here. if I can get it out of this thing. It won't come out of here.
Use a crochet hook.
Yeah, that's true. I do have crochet hooks. There it is. I use this little thing. So this is a yarn needle threader. It's got a thin hook and a thicker hook on the end, and you put it through. You put it through the needle. So you just take the needle and stick it on here, and then you grab your yarn and hook it over, and keep a tiny amount of tension on it, and then you can pull it through to thread really easily. So I just use that thing, but if dental flossers work, those are a lot easier to get a hold of a lot of them and not lose them. I've held on to that one for a while, but mostly because I keep it in that little case and it won't come out of there. So I'm going to put this stuff away and we'll go back to, to the loop yarn. See how this goes. All right. So this is the loop it yarn that I started talking about earlier. I already counted out the 50 loops that I needed because I figured that was more interesting. Well, it wasn't going to be interesting at all to listen to me count out loops. So I counted out, they recommended 50 loops for this project, and then they all need to be going upwards. So trying to lay them out here, and I stuck a pin right there. So there's my 50 loops, so that'll be the width of the blanket that I'll be making. The other thing, I actually counted out 51 loops because a bunch of places were recommending that you take the very last loop. So this is not enough tail to sew in all the way down here, this little bitty tail. So what they were recommending was, I think I need scissors for this, to cut this loop open so that there's enough tail there to sew into the project. So this way you can like weave in the tail and there's enough there then to weave in. So I would maybe even consider cutting 2 loops because that tail is almost still a little bit short, but we're going to go with it. So now that I've messed my loops back up here, lay these guys all back out. All right, so the next thing to do is to get this row based on what I was looking at. And so you need to take your 51st loop and pass it through the 50th loop. We can try and do it on the close camera. I don't know if it'll be on screen. I can slide this over here though. So this was my 50th loop. And so I need to like loop these back. And so it's going to be past this loop through the back side of this one. And then get the next loop and pass it through. And then take the next one and pass it through. And so I think you just work like this. Keep pulling these loops up so that they're available for the next row. And I think you just work like this down here. So I can see how this could be kind of fun and relaxing. I found knitting not stressful, but it there was more effort needed than I had time to put into it. I'm very good at crocheting, and I've got my skill set down, and it just seemed like so much learning curve to actually learn to crochet or learn to knit. That I learned to cast on and knit a couple of rows, and then I made a mistake, and then I didn't know how to fix it, and so I just sort of put it aside and went back to crocheting. So, I don't know if any of you guys have worked with this yarn before. If you have, let me know what you thought of it. I know somebody commented in the past that the loops weren't very hardy, And if they break, then your project just unravels because knitting does that. If you drop a loop, that all of the loops below it sort of rely on that. So you can't really recover from that if the loop, well, you can recover, but it would be a real pain. You'd have to sew that loop back closed and then fix all of the knit above it. But I could see how this could be fun to teach kids. Like, it's going pretty quickly, and there's basically no skill to it so much as just, I mean, there's different techniques you can do to it. Like, don't get me wrong, there's still it's still a craft, but there's not that same learning curve that I was just talking about. Like, I'm just passing loops through other loops, and I can do this back and forth all evening, and I can do it relatively easily while talking to you guys, and it's pretty straightforward. You don't have to learn how to tension anything. You don't have to learn how to hold a needle or a hook. I did that one backwards. So there's I say that there's no skill to it, and then I did it wrong. So, but yeah, it's low effort to learn how to do this. To obviously to make fancier or more interesting techniques. That blanket that I showed earlier had cables, and they looked really interesting, but I thought were going to be a little bit too difficult to try on stream, especially since I had literally never worked with this stuff before. So all I did was open the ball and count out 50 loops to get us started. So, but yeah, I do remember that somebody said that was their biggest complaint, was that the loops didn't hold up. So obviously I cannot comment on that yet. So far I haven't had any broken loops, so that's something. And I really do like this, like, vanilla white color that I've got going on here. So, done checking out for the evening. Have a good night. Thank you for watching and joining us tonight. Shalene's saying as long as you don't skip a loop. Yeah, I guess if you skip a loop, you're in a lot of trouble, because there's not really any way to fix that. You'd probably just have to start ripping things out. So, but yeah, I don't think there's any way to recover from that. And these are actually kind of tricky. So you can see, like, this loop, this one's kind of wanting to hide back there, so I could see it being pretty easy to skip a loop. I suppose what you could do if you did skip a loop and you were working a blanket like I'm doing, where it's just all knits and it didn't really matter, you probably could, like, get away with tucking that loop in if you had a crochet hook, and you could just pull it and tuck that loop in. I think would be possible. So I think that's about all you could do, would be to just hide that loop. So, what else are you guys working on, project-wise? So, I know Shalene said she's working on doing some beading, and we went over that. But what else is on everyone's agenda? Like I said, I've got projects for the channel that I want to work on, and then I've got a couple of more crochet edge blankets that I want to work on, and so that's what's on my list to do next. And then I had fun sewing the other day. I did some pillowcases, and I'd like to get the curtains done for the craft room down here. But yeah. All right, so that's all of my first row done. And then you always, with this stuff, apparently you're supposed to just keep working with it staying stationary. You don't turn it like you do with crochet. So it said always work with the right side facing, and so I'm just going to keep going with making loops. So it's a little bit tricky. Getting those first few loops started seems to be the trickiest part of working with this stuff. Once you get a few loops in, it's not so bad. So. But yeah, so I guess the other thing I could ask, let's see, we've got one more week before Halloween. So we'll live stream next week, and then I think Halloween's next Thursday. So does anyone have any big plans for Halloween? I usually take my friends' kids trick-or-treating. I have for the last 7 years. So we'll do that, and then I don't know what other plans we have. I think my mom's coming down to visit. So let's see. Stephanie said she's testing her first pattern for Rachel Newen. So that's something that I really used to love to do, was test patterns for her. It was always a lot of fun to sort of get the patterns ahead of everybody and get to work on those, and then you get, to sort of help somebody out and whatnot. So that was always fun for me. Let's see. It's a cowl, and then she's also working on a beaded shawl for her aunt who will be visiting from England for Christmas. So that's fun. A beaded shawl. How much beading is on the shawl? So I've done shawls where the edge is beaded, but I have not done one that is beaded all the way through. Where you put like beads in the body and stuff. I want to, but I have not committed that much time and effort into one shawl. So and then Stephanie said that Halloween's her birthday, but no big plans. So that's...
What is your guinea pig going as for?
My husband wants to know what your guinea pig is going for as Halloween this year. And happy birthday. Sorry, I didn't say that first. Runaway Needle Red said that they're working on a big blanket and almost done. Using the leaping stripe pattern from Moogly. Not familiar with that one. And using Yikes. Homespun and black worsted on a big blanket is way more project than I would be willing to take on. That is a huge undertaking. Those are kind of notoriously the worst things possible to do. So you're working on a big project with two of the, like, the not that nobody likes black yarn or homespun. Like, they're beautiful yarns, so don't get me wrong, but they're, like, notoriously the hardest two things to work with. Black yarn because it's hard to see your stitches, and homespun for sort of the same reason, but a little bit different. It's that the stitches are like just impossible to see. So really impressed by that. I'd love to see pictures of that.
The leaping stripes kind of looks like it looks like the spike where you work like 2 stitches up into another row.
Okay.
I think that's the leap.
Yeah. Okay, so my husband's describing the leaping stripes blanket to me because I don't know what it looks like, but it sounds pretty cool, like a spike stitch type of blanket. Runaway Needle Red's saying it's so cozy and the colors look like butterfly wings. I bet it looks awesome. I just got a yarn not too long ago. I don't have any idea where it's at right this second, but it's like shiburi or shibui dyed. It looks like a monarch butterfly. It's red, or it's orange and black and white, and it's got a dye technique that I've never seen before. And I don't know. It's either... Yeah, I literally don't know. I opened it, and then I think I went out of town. And then the basement flooded, and I don't know that I've seen it since. It's probably upstairs somewhere, but I have no idea where. It's really, really a cool looking yarn. It was a random, like, Facebook ad that I saw for an Etsy listing. Which apparently was effective advertising because I bought it. But it's just really the coolest yarn. He's gonna go see if he can find it. But yeah, I get the desire to want to work with black because it looks so cool, like outlining everything, but it is a bit of a struggle if you don't have really good lighting. Let's see. Stephanie's saying that the shawl is just the edging. And oh, I'll have to wait till my husband comes back and let him know that the guinea pigs are going to be a shark and a mermaid. I love that they're like a theme as well as guinea pigs wearing costumes. So it's not just that it's guinea pigs wearing costumes, it's also that they like have a matched sea theme. So that's pretty awesome. So yeah. I don't know if he'll be able to find that yarn. Like I said, I don't actually remember the last time I saw it. I got it, I opened it, basement flooded, didn't get any further than that. Runaway Needle saying that the blanket is so far a little bit bigger than a twin, trying to make it full or queen sized. Wow. Like I said, I have not attempted anything that big at all. I tend to get bored too quickly with projects and just don't stay attached to them long enough to work on a blanket that size. So one of these days I will try. He did find the yarn. I'll move this off to the side here. So this is that yarn I was talking about. It's by, I'm not sure if it's WIP or WIP. I'm not sure if they pronounce it or just say the letters. WIP yarns. And it is made, this is called Sock Rock. The colorway is called Fright Night. It's 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, 100 grams or 3.5 ounces, 463 yards or 423 meters. So this is what this looks like, but it's just, I've never seen a dyeing technique like this. I don't actually have any idea how they did it, unless they actually did tie-dye it. I actually haven't looped this to see what it looks like, if I can figure out how it might have been dyed. This is made of like vellum, which is interesting. But let's see if we sometimes if you take it apart. So yeah, it looks like it probably was actually tie-dyed in some fashion. If I was guessing, and I'm not positive, if I was guessing, what they probably did was tie-dyed, like tied the white spots, dyed the entire thing orange, then tied the orange spots, and then dyed black over top the orange. That's, if I was going to do this, that's how I guess I would start to replicate this. I actually have no idea how they did it in reality. That's just my best guess at this point, but it is so cool. And I don't know if it looks all that different to you guys on camera, but it looks so different in front of me. Like, these really short little bits are not something you generally see on hand-dyed yarns. But you can sort of see, if I twist it like that, that they line up into stripes. And so I could envision where like this could be tied and then dyed over or something like that. Or I'm completely wrong and I have no idea how it was done. So, let's see. New commenter, I think, Helen, saying that she loves the videos, that she finds them informative. That's great to hear. Thank you for joining us and commenting and letting me know that you're liking the video. And if you're not a first-time commenter, I apologize. I was just, the name didn't look familiar. I don't know what I just did there. Bunched it up pretty good. But yeah, so this, when you said it looked like butterfly wings, and I know that this is not what you meant, that you meant that it was framed and colorful in between, but, it reminded me of this yarn, which I thought looked like a monarch butterfly. And I don't think I've got time to turn this into a shawl by Halloween, but I would love to have it for Halloween. So maybe next year. I don't think I can get that back on here. I'm going to have to open that up and rewrap it. But, for the most part, this stuff seems to be going okay. If you had a little kid that you wanted to teach to do, something, a lot of times little kids want to learn, but they're just not quite old enough to get, like, tensioning. Some little kids do just fine. I know that there are people who have 4 and 5-year-olds who crochet with pretty, like, high level of skill. And then some kids cannot get it, like, just cannot get it whatsoever. They don't understand the tensioning, and they're just not there yet. And so if you had a little kid who was really desperate to learn to make something because they watch you make them, a grandchild or a child of your own or a friend's kid or whoever, this would be super fast to teach them. It's just loops through loops. And you can't really mess it up. And even if you do, like, all that happens is, you know, you might skip a loop and we're going to have to hide it or something. I have skipped a couple loops now, but they're relatively easy to just pull out. Like, you can just kind of grab hold of this and just pull, which is pretty nice. So that's not the case with knitting, like actual regular knitting on needles. You can't just pull it out for a number of different reasons. But what am I doing here? All right, so that one's done. Okay. But you can't just pull it out because it'll all just fall apart, and then you got to get your needles back in there, and it's a whole thing. So I really like that part of crochet where you can just grab a hold and pull it back out if you make a mistake, and there's not really any repercussions other than you have to do it over. Knitting seems like it takes too much effort to make a mistake. So I don't know what I just did here. I think I looped it the wrong way. Oh no, it just got tipped over. Okay. Helen's saying that she doesn't comment because there's too many comments that go by fast. That's okay if you don't want to comment, but please feel like you can comment. And anybody watching who's not comfortable commenting, like, I love seeing the comments. You can throw them in there. Even if I don't get to it, I don't generally miss comments, but even if I do, my husband's usually watching too, so that he can let me know. And I can answer any question. So I love seeing comments from people, so please feel like you can comment if you want to. But you certainly don't have to ever. But yeah, when people are commenting and talking, the live stream just goes really quickly and easily on my end. It helps me have a conversation with the camera. Otherwise I sometimes feel a little bit like I'm talking to myself. Even though I know you guys are out there watching, like, it's easier to have a two-way conversation for me. And I think that'll probably get a little bit easier as I get more comfortable and stream more. But still, it's always fun to just have comments coming through, and I like to chat with you guys. And Helen says she's been watching for a little over a year, so which means you've been watching basically the whole time I've been making videos, because I think I'm at about 18 months or so. I think April of last year is when we started the channel. So thank you for joining us and commenting this time and letting me know you're here. And I'm glad that you are watching and continue to watch. So thank you for joining me tonight. And that goes for everybody who's out there watching, commenting or not. Thank you for joining and checking out the channel and seeing what's going on here. I don't know. This has been fun for me. I like doing the live streaming. It's fun to just kind of chat with people. So this is a little bit different than doing the videos, which are a little more structured and a little less interactive for me, I guess. Like I answer questions, but I can't like have a chat with somebody. So this is fun. I don't know how late we'll stream tonight. I'm just working on this, and if there's comments and questions or things to talk about, I will stay and talk about those. So, but really, as far as like things to show off or things to show, there's not much else that I wanted to talk about tonight. Runaway Needle Red saying that she enjoys the chats as well. And Joyce saying she's cooking while watching. It's kind of funny to think about, but like there's a podcast that I listen to while I cook, and so it's kind of funny to be the person that somebody's listening to. So that's kind of fun to hear. A lot of times I do that, like while I'm washing the dishes or while I'm cooking, I'll listen to something, and so that's kind of fun to hear. Trey's saying if there's a suggestion on quick blankets, teenage niece and nephew have placed requests. So the quickest blanket is to do a crochet edge blanket. If you want to do a fully crocheted blanket, then I would recommend using a big yarn. But not crazy big. So what I would recommend is Bernat blanket yarn. It goes by quick enough. I would work one hook size up from what they recommend. I think they recommend an 8mm and I use a 9mm, or they recommend a 9 and I use a 10. I don't remember which. But like a corner to corner pattern, which is available on my channel, or you can find a written version of that, goes really quickly, but not as quick as a crochet edge blanket. And so by a crochet edge blanket, I showed some of those earlier, but I think my husband could probably pop one of the pictures back up, potentially.
Oh, yeah, I was getting the crochet edge blanket.
The corner to corner. Yeah, the crochet edge one is pretty easy to do if you've got a skip cutter. I would strongly recommend the skip cutter from Kay's Crochet on Amazon. I have a friend at my knitting night who used the Fiskars one and used whatever random one Joanne Fabric had, and both of them didn't cut nearly as well as the Kay's Crochet one. She ended up having to order that one online, and it worked like 50 times better than either of the other ones she had bought. And in the case of the Fiskars one, it was pretty badly like beat up before she ever even used it. Like, she showed me the new blade and it was all nicked and looked terrible. And when I went to go buy a Fiskars one just to like do a review video with it, mine was also pretty badly nicked up. So so this is a crochet edge blanket. You just take this, so you You can do 1 or 2 layers of fleece if you want it a little bit thinner to be used with like a top sheet or like with another blanket. A single layer is fine. If you want to do a double layer, they're a little bit trickier because you got to get the fleece to lay on top of each other and cut the holes at the same time. You can't cut them separately. So if you lay the two together, you trim the ends, and then you take the skip cutter, which is basically a blade that looks like a gear, and it's got little points on it, and you run it across, and it cuts where the points are and skips over sections where there's no point. And so it cuts all the holes for you, and then you do a single crochet around, and then you can do any kind of border you want. This one was one that I did that was just kind of like little peaks, and then I did another one that had sort of scallops on the edge, and I did that with a Bernat velvet, and that goes super quick. They're really nice for teenagers for a couple of reasons. So one, you can pick something that they're into now, that it doesn't matter if they're not into it in a couple of weeks, or, well, not weeks, but, a couple months. So in the case of the ones that I showed, they're Harry Potter for 8-year-olds. They're probably not going to be into Harry Potter in 2 years. And so it doesn't matter. I did them in 2 days, and if they are not interested in Harry Potter in a couple of years, it doesn't matter. Where if you spent the next couple of months working on like a giant Grafgan of a Harry Potter character, they better like Harry Potter for like 10 more years.
You can also do sports because there's lots of sports.
Yeah, there's, so when you do the crochet edges, you can do anything that like the fabric store has. So my husband was saying you can do sports teams. They have tons of sports teams. They've got tons of like movies and both cartoon movies, and like they've usually have like Star Wars, and they have Game of Thrones and things like that. I'm trying to think what else they've got. Just lots of random characters and patterns, and you can do plaid, and I'm trying to look and see what I've got. I've got horses and houndstooth and polar bears wearing scarves, and so those are all different fleeces that you can get that make it for a super easy blanket. But I think that they look just a little nicer than any of the crochet or the like tie blankets or anything like that. Like they're still sort of the same thing. It's just 2 layers of fleece, but they look just so much prettier and just nicer finish on them. They also feel a little bit nicer. I always hated tie blankets because of the big knots. If you ended up like sitting or like laying on one of those knots, it would actually like push into you and not be super comfortable. So yeah, it's one option. The other option, like I said, is to work with a bigger yarn, and just do a pattern that works up quickly. And for that, I would recommend probably a corner to corner, done in blanket yarn. The one thing I can say that I wasn't like overly thrilled with the corner to corner done in the blanket yarn was it was a little bit stiff. And so what you might want to do, I think I recommended going up 1 hook size for working with Bernat blanket. You probably could get away with going up 2, maybe 2.5. Well, you probably can't go half sizes at that size. You probably go up 2 to 3 sizes to get a little bit more like drape and flexibility. So that's an option. Helen's saying that she must have the skip cutter that I was talking about that works very well. I'm not sure if she means the Fiskars one or the Case Crochet one. It could just be that Fiskars released a bad batch, and I don't necessarily want to say like don't ever use them, they're terrible, but in my experience the couple that I saw all had nicks in the blades. The problem with a little nick in the blade like doesn't sound that bad, but what it means is that every time that like tooth with the nick goes through, it doesn't split the thing open all the way. And that means when you go back in with a crochet hook that you can't get it in there because it's closed off. So the one thing that I should clarify here is that I don't recommend using blanket yarn with the crochet edge blanket. Like, don't combine the two ideas. The blanket yarn will be way too heavy on the edge of that. It'll be too thick to come through the holes on most skip cutters, and it'll also just not lay right for you. So there's two separate ideas. Either use blanket yarn and a quick pattern like a corner to corner, or make a crochet edge blanket and use like a worsted weight yarn. So the ones that I was showing there, one was worked up with Karen Simply Soft Party, which is why it has a little bit of shimmer to it. And the other was with Lion Brand Velux, which I think is a number 4 weight, even though it's the chenille style yarn. So hopefully that helps. If you have any more specific questions, let me know and I can see if I can clarify. Shalene's saying she uses a 10 millimeter and up. Yeah, I think that having a bigger hook would definitely help with a little bit more drape. And yeah, using a larger hook. Yeah, the when you work with an 8 millimeter hook, it's not so much that it's the wrong size. It's just like it drags too much or something. It's not really a phenomena you see with finer yarns, but when you get to this big fluffy chenille yarn, the loops are just, they don't want to slide as nicely, and so it kills your wrists and it hurts your hands to keep like dragging the hook through. So if you use a little bit bigger yarn, the yarn doesn't like seem to interact with itself as much, and it just goes a lot smoother. So in any video where I've talked about using it, I've always recommended at least a hook size up, and I think in the case of making like a full blanket, I would go at least 2. So yeah, so I got about 4 rows of this stuff worked up just while like talking to you guys, and it looks pretty cool actually. So there is like a bind off that you can do so that you eat up these like last loops. So you have to keep that in mind when you're working, that you leave yourself a full row to bind off. And I have to read the instructions on how to do that because I actually have no idea.
You're gonna bind it off that quick? You're not gonna make more?
No, I'm gonna make more. I'm just saying, like, when you do this, keep in mind that you've got to deal with these loops on the end. Otherwise, you just have loops on the end. So
how fast did that work up versus if you had been crocheting that whole time?
If I had been crocheting and talking versus if I had been this was really easy to do while I was talking because I wasn't really paying all that much attention. It looks like I have a loop here that I skipped, so obviously I wasn't paying close enough attention. But I think my husband's asking if I think it would have been faster to crochet this or if it was quicker to work these loops up. I think I probably would have crocheted about the same amount with less errors. Part of that is just because this is like while I'm doing something, I'm talking and doing extra stuff. Part of it's just because I haven't worked with this before and I'm not paying close enough attention, really. But like I said, this is relatively easy to rip back. So that's something. If you do make a mistake, it's easy enough to fix as long as you know that you need to check your rows at the end. Stephanie's asking if there's things that I've wanted to make that haven't made that I haven't had the time to. There's always a million things that I haven't made because I haven't had the time to. I actually just had a coworker ask if I would make a couple of, he has twin daughters that are less than a year old. Asked if I would make cardigans for them. Obviously willing to pay me for my time and the yarn. It's always a weird thing. I don't really like to work for payment if I can help it. I'd rather just make presents for people. Because I always feel like I don't know how much to charge them. And especially with coworkers, and I don't know. I always feel weird about it. But I probably will end up making some cardigans for them. But yeah, there's always a million things that I want to make. There's amigurumi patterns, which always take more time than they seem like they should. And they're fun to make, but they're so labor intensive for like how small they are. And you think, oh, I can do that in a weekend, and then it ends up being like so many tiny little parts that have to be sewn together and stuffed properly and shaped properly. And so there's a couple patterns that I've looked at that I want to do with those. And then there's always about 50,000 shawls that I want to make. So, and more being released every day. Helen's saying, what's wrong with using the blanket yarn? She was out of the room when I said it. So for the blanket yarn around the edge of a blanket, I think you're going to run into two problems. The first being that it's going, so the holes that the skip cutter cuts, and each blade is a little bit different, but my holes are, I don't know, you probably could comfortably get like a 6.5 millimeter hook through there, but I don't think you could really quite get an 8 or 9 millimeter hook through. So I think you're going to have a hard time using a large enough hook to get the Bernat blanket through. And I think it'll just be too heavy. Like the blanket, the edge of the blanket's just going to weigh too much because that yarn is so heavy in comparison to like what the fabric can deal with. So I think you'd risk ripping your holes apart as well, which is something I didn't say earlier. So when you cut those, they're only, I don't know, maybe less than a centimeter apart. They're probably, I don't know, what is that, a quarter of an inch or so? Like quarter to half an inch apart. And so if you get too big of a yarn in there, you'd be at risk of ripping the fabric and blending them together. And if that happens, it might rip all the way down and your whole edging would potentially fall off. But I think I would just not, I think Bernat blanket is just going to be too big for the edge is really the short answer there, for any number of reasons. But the yarn I showed is a chenille style yarn, but it is Lion Brand Velux, and so it's only a number 4 weight yarn. So I think you can get away with that. You probably can also get away with Bernat Velvet, which is also a little bit thinner than Bernat Blanket. So if you really want a chenille style yarn, I would go with one of the shinier ones. So Velux, Velvet, Premier Parfait, all are chenille style yarns that are a little bit finer than Bernat Blanket. They're also a little less grabby. Bernat Blanket is a little bit like a microfiber cloth. Like it wants to cling to stuff, and I think trying to drag that through fleece will be a real chore. So, excuse me. It's been a long day. I've been working on doing some stuff at work and like sort of some plumbing type stuff, and it's been a lot of crawling around on the floor and working on my hands and knees and trying to get stuff moved around. So it's been an interesting couple days. It's an interesting thing. I don't talk about too much about what I do for my job, but by training or by education, I'm a chemist. And so what they don't tell you is a lot of chemistry and doing chemistry ends up being a lot of plumbing and like mechanical work. So it's interesting. You learn all about chemical reactions and stuff in school, but the things you end up doing are like plumbing and running cords and weird stuff like that tends to be. Though some of that is because I work for a startup company and you just do what you have to do to keep things running. So, Shalene's saying that the Bernat blanket makes excellent dust mitts, and that's, like I said, it's probably like a microfiber cloth. So it probably picks up dust just as well. So I would imagine that that's true, that it works as a good dust mitt. So I have seen people use them as, instead of using like Swiffer, like disposable pads, they'll just make microfiber rectangles, and then you make like a loop piece that just hooks over the edge of the Swiffer, and you can do your floor and then throw it in the wash machine and just keep reusing it, so that you don't have to keep buying Swiffer pads. You can also, like, if you want a Swiffer wet, you can just make it wet, or spray it with whatever floor cleaner you want and clean your floor. So I've seen those, and I think there are patterns on Ravelry for all the different types of non-Swiffer branded Swiffers. Whatever you call those floor mops that are not actually Swiffer brand. So Shalene's saying good night to both myself and my husband, and have a good night. Thank you for joining us, Shalene. I think we're probably getting close to wrapping up for the evening as well. Yeah. So if there are any other questions, I'd be happy to take those. If you've got any last minute questions about yarn or crochet or anything like that. As always, if you have questions that you think of that are not on a Tuesday night and you want to send them to me, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Experiments in Crafting. You can always message me there or tag me in a post or something like that and get a hold of me that way. I am pretty responsive on there, though I have noticed that Facebook is getting worse and worse at notifying me when I get messages. So bear with me if you're not seeing them there. You can always also leave a comment on any of my videos, because I do get notifications about those as well. And then I hesitate to point this out because we actually have had a couple of people, I think, accidentally unsubscribe. So I've mentioned before that if you're not getting notifications, to make sure you're subscribed and that you click the bell. And I think a couple of people have clicked the bell and unsubscribed themselves because they already were subscribed. So just be careful that when you're clicking subscribe that it's not actually unsubscribing you. And that if you're clicking the bell that you're looking for all notifications instead of personalized. Let's see. Runaway Needle Red is saying, or is asking how I like the steel clover hooks. I really love all of the clover hooks. I have the whole set of Clover Amours. The only complaint I have about the whole range is that I wish that the large hooks were metal. So there's a couple different lines here. So she's talking about the Clover steel hooks, I think. These guys. These ones, yeah. So the steel hooks come in a set of 7, and you get a variety of sizes there. And then, as was pointed out earlier on the stream, that they have caps over the top of them. And then there's a set of 10 that are B through J, I believe, including a 4.5, which is a 7. So you get B through J plus 7, which is 9 hooks or 10 hooks. You get out of that set. They're metal. So are the steel crochet hooks. And then K hook and up are plastic. And it's ABS, and it's pretty nice plastic, but it's not like the slippery metal. So I really, really love the regular Amours. The steel hooks are very similar, though now that I'm feeling them, they don't feel like they've got quite the same powder coat on them, but I have used them on a bunch of projects, and I really, really liked them. They feel well built. One of the things to note is that they feel like they go all the way through. Like, I can't bend this or move it in any fashion. I had some really cheap steel hooks, which I remembered about after I sent my husband searching for hooks upstairs. But I have some, well, maybe I don't have them anymore. They're over here, maybe. I have some really cheap steel hooks that I ordered for like $1 from China on eBay, and it took like 6 weeks to get here. Sort of like things from Wish before Wish existed. But they're steel hooks, and then they're set in plastic handles, but the hook only goes to about right here. So like this part right here is metal, and then the rest of this is just plastic. And so it's pretty easy, and I might actually have a broken one. It's pretty easy for these just to fall out over time. They work fine. They, like I said, they might have literally been $1. And then other steel crochet hooks that I've got here are just so fine, and they really just start to bother your hands after a while, I think. It's really nice to have the bulk of the protective coating on these. And I don't think that there are that many companies that make the ergonomic hooks with in steel hooks. So all of that to say, I think that they're worth getting. I've mentioned in the past that I use a website called camelcamelcamel.com, and that will let you set like a price threshold. Well, it'll do two things. It shows you the price of any like item on Amazon over time. So it's really, really nice coming into like sale season and Cyber Monday and Black Friday and all that, because you can go on and see if that item is actually cheaper than what it's been all year. So you can kind of, I think Amazon got in trouble a while back ago. Like they kept showing like this item is $25 and it's 75% off because its list price is $100, and in reality it had been $25 for like months, but the list price was only $50, and so they made it a bigger sale by making it originally more expensive, but it didn't actually cost you any less. I think that was what they got in trouble for. And so Camel will let you go on and just see what the list price has been for X amount of time. But the other thing it'll let you do is see, like, set a reminder or set like a notification if a price drops. And so the Clover steel hook set, I want to say, hovers around like $35, $40, somewhere in there for the 7-piece set. And if you set a notification and if it falls under, I think if the regular Clover hooks go under $25, I get an email and I go buy them. They very, very rarely fall below 25. They usually hover about 35 to 40. And so that's one thing you could do is if you're on the fence about upgrading, you could set a reminder for yourself. And then if you've got a price threshold that you've got to meet to make it worth it for you, then you can kind of get the notification and get the hooks you want. So it works with most things. I actually have found that it doesn't work great with like obscure craft items because it has to have enough data to generate the graph to be useful. And the item has to like stick around long enough. A lot of the yarn listings seem to be like random people listing 3 balls of yarn, and they don't actually have like more of it, or people aren't using that listing. So that I've run into a little bit with craft items. But for the most part, like things that are stocked by a real company, like as far as like Clover actually, Amazon actually stocks the Clover hooks and like sells them, then it's not a problem. But if it's just like one random ball of yarn, then you're not going to get the pricing information. Stephanie's saying that she just tried the Clover Amour hooks and really loves them. Way easier to use and really nice glide. And yeah, that's basically the best summary you could give. it's really hard to explain in words how nicely they just glide through the yarn. And it's just so much nicer to use. I mean, you saw the bucket of hooks that I've got here. I've got hooks over here, and none of them have won out over the clover hooks. I thought, I'm trying to remember the name of the hook brand, Tulip. Tulip is the other big, like, Japanese company that makes hooks. They're pretty nice. I've used them. They feel about the same in my hand, but they don't glide the same. And there's some sort of coating on these Clover Amour hooks that they just glide through. And so far, as heavy as I use them, that coating has not come off. So it's either part of the metal or pretty aggressively attached in some fashion. Some sort of powder coat or something like that. So, yeah, I could go on and on about Clover hooks and probably have too many times in the past, but if you're looking for the perfect present for, like, if you have no idea what to tell your family to get you for Christmas and you want something crochet related, I think it's really hard to ask for yarn in a lot of cases because people are so picky about what they like personally. But one of the best things you could get yourself or, like, ask for yourself would be upgraded hooks because it just makes it so much nicer. And like I said, a lot of times the 10-piece set will go, like I said, it hovers around about $30, but occasionally you can get it for $25, and it's absolutely worth it at that point. And really it's worth it at about $40. I think list price, like real list price on the Clover hooks is $75 for the 10 hook set. And that feels a little bit steep. $7.50 a hook doesn't feel like a great deal. The other thing is at least at the Joann Fabric by Me, you can buy them individually and acquire the set over time. And use 50% off coupons. And I think the hooks generally are about $7 a piece. They might be $8 a piece. And if you use a 50% off coupon, that gets you about $4 a hook. And so over time, you'll spend maybe a little bit more than the 10 hook set, but you'll end up with the whole set over time just using coupons here and there. So, Helen's saying, let me see here. Trey's saying the Michael set is $79.99, and that's interesting. I think that's actually that's the highest price I've seen on that set. Unless they've got, it could be that the set. So the Clover hooks come in. They either come in like a box where they're just like all poked into like a piece of foam, or they come in a bag. Maybe the set with the bag is a little bit more expensive, or Michael's is just expensive, which is a possibility. But if you're allowed to use a coupon, then you can get it into the same ballpark. I don't know that Michael's ever has a coupon better than 40%. They occasionally have 50% off coupon. But I don't think I've ever seen a 60% at Michael's. But Joann does occasionally run a 60% off. Though it seems like whenever they run the 60% off a single item, they do not run it seems like hooks are always on sale. I have never caught hooks not on sale so that you can use the coupon. So, my husband's saying that they're $31 right now, which is really a good price. That's $3.10 a piece. Like, if you have a birthday coming up or Christmas is coming up, like, that's a reasonable, I think, amount to ask, for an item that I think you'll get a ton of use out of. He's saying that stores would price match it likely. I don't know if Michael's and Joann price match. I guess I've never tried, but they might. Usually the selection of crafting stuff is so bleak on Amazon. Like, I would never try and match like a Lion brand yarn because they just don't sell through Amazon. Yeah, Stephanie's saying that you can use Joann coupons at Michael's and other craft store coupons. They do accept competitor coupons. So yeah, I guess if there's a 60% off at Joann and then Michael's doesn't have the hooks on sale, you could use it there and potentially catch that. So that would be good. I think there was a comment higher that I missed.
Oh yeah, Helen talking about the G hooks.
Oh yeah, I did read that, and yeah. So Helen was mentioning that she's noticing that G hooks are having a little bit of an argument on whether they're 4s or 4.25. And I see this back and forth. I think actually my light up hooks were, I was using a 4mm G hook. The Clover G's are 4s. And the light up hook, when I went to pull it out, the 4mm was an F hook and the G hook was a 4.5, which is just wrong. Like, it should be, that's a 7 hook. And so I guess what I'm saying is some companies are tend to size things a little bit different, which is I guess why it's nice when they put the millimeter size and the letter size. Like, there's a little bit of fuzziness, I guess, around the G size. I've seen this too on in the 3mm. So it's really, really difficult to find a 3mm crochet hook. It's very easy to get a 3.5. That's usually an E hook. A D hook is usually 3.25. And then a B hook or a C hook goes to 2.75. And so you can get 3.25 and 2.75, but it's very, very rare that you can get a 3.0mm. And you're talking about 1/4 millimeter, so it's hard to say that could possibly even matter. But there's a 0.5 millimeter between the two. And so it's like, well, you got to pick one way or the other. But the two hooks are 0.5 millimeter, which does make a difference. So a 5 versus a 5.5 millimeter hook actually makes a pretty big difference when you work it up. But it just feels like 1/4 millimeter couldn't possibly matter. And then occasionally you'll get a project that calls for a 3mm hook, and it's like, I don't even own a 3mm hook. So I guess the long and the short of it is companies use different millimeter sizes and they put whatever letter they want on there, because nobody is really governing crochet hooks. So I think I own a single 3mm hook, and it's a really bizarre hook. I don't know if it's in here. One of these days, my plan is to do a hook shootout, or like a big comparison video, and just gather up all of my hooks and tell you what I like about each one and what I don't like about them. And I think that it would be helpful for a lot of people. But the conclusion of that video, I can tell you right now, is I have yet to find a hook that has overthrown the Clover Amours since the first time I tried them. So I've used all sorts of different things. I did notice, though, one of the things that I wanted to address, Helen was saying something about her hands being arthritic. And one of the things, so the Clover Amours are supposed to help with that. I don't know that they're quite big enough to make a huge difference. I don't have arthritic hands, but I don't know that they make as huge of a difference. They are easier on the hands because the motions are easier. And it is nice to just have the little bit of cushion. But one of the things that Boy used to sell is this, and I think you can still get this around. It's this ergonomic handle that gives you like an egg to hold on to. And it is really, really comfortable in the hand. It has no like decoration or anything like that to like interfere. And what you do is, let me see if I've got one. You take a hook and it comes with these collars. The ergonomic holder comes with these like collars that you put on the hooks. So this is a K hook, and you just drop it into here and close it up, and then the collar stops it from pulling out of here, and you can just hold on to this. So if arthritis is really bothering you while you're working, this might be an option. This was made by Boy, and it's called like the ergonomic kit or something like that. But you can use it with any of the, you can use it with Boy or Bates hooks. Obviously Boy wants you to use it with their hooks, but it doesn't matter because you just put a collar on it and stick the hook in there. I don't think you can use it with the Amore hooks, though I've never actually tried. You cannot because the hole here is too small. You could maybe get somebody to drill that out. But yeah, you could actually, if this end fit on here, you could actually use this and then still have the slipperiness of this hook with the hand size on this thing. So that's maybe a project for my husband to 3D print me something like this. The base of this is too narrow to put the Clover and More hooks in. Like, it won't fit in here.
We can also slightly drill it out.
I don't know if it would be wide enough even drilled out. Like this and this are roughly the same size. Sure. So,
yeah, we can try.
But you can stick these in here, and they don't need a shaft collar on them because they've got a lip there. So you could actually use this again then. I could use it again. Because the reason I stopped using this was not because I didn't like it. I actually really like this thing. The reason I stopped using it is because the metal on the Clover and More hooks is so much nicer.
It's really cheap. It's only $6.
It's only, he's saying it's only $6 to get from Amazon. So if you have arthritis and you want a really quick fix for $6, this is definitely like, you can hang on to this thing, and it's like such a weird little shape, but if you have uncoated hooks, you can stick them right in here. And I say you can use Bates hooks. I don't actually have an uncoated one to test, but I don't see any reason that you can't. And I think you can use, it probably is. Does it look like this?
Yeah.
Okay, then it's
Crochet dude. Ergonomic aluminum crochet handle.
That sounds right-ish.
Fits all hook sizes. Contains one handle with 8 washers.
Yeah.
It calls it a cabone ring, though. That's what I don't understand. It says cabone ring for crochet camel. That title seems totally wrong.
Yeah. Oh, my. Yeah, that's the right thing. Yeah. Sorry, he was showing me what was on that link, but I had to realize that it wasn't on stream. So, all right. So Helen's saying, she's seen it in craft magazines when they show hook sizes used to 4mm G. Like I said, I think that's what my Clover hooks are 4mm G. But I have seen it interchangeably with a 4 1/4. People are just inconsistent. I don't know why anyone would want a 4 1/4 over a 4. Because again, a 7 hook, well, actually, that's probably why. I would bet in companies that don't carry a 7 hook that they have 4 1/4 G hooks. Because then you can use, you can probably fudge it a little bit and use a 4 1/4 for both a 4 and a 4 1/2. That's probably what they're doing, is that they don't carry a 7 hook. I wonder if that's true, if I've got a G hook in here. Yeah. So Boy, I know, does not standard carry a 7 hook. They skip it, and their G hook is a 4 1/4. So I would bet that that's the difference. In companies that carry a 7 hook, like this one here, well, it doesn't matter. I can't. Here's my 7 hook. So this is a 4 1/2mm. So this is a 7 hook, 4 1/2mm, and then their G hook is a 4. I would bet in companies that don't carry a 7 hook that they use 4 1/4 to split the difference. I have one of those. It does work well. It's just remembering to change the size of the hook. Yeah. So that is the downside of this, is that you have to keep pulling your hook out if you want to like change projects rather than just switching hooks. Or get more of these, I guess, is a possibility. If they're only $6, like you could have 2 of them probably. So, yeah. So I don't know if that's the definitive answer, but that would be my bet, is that that's what you're seeing, is that companies who are skimping on the 7 hooks are giving you a 4 1/4 G hook. So I have noticed too that when they come from seemingly like China and Japan and things like that, that they tend to be like whole millimeter sizes. I don't see a lot of like partial sizes a lot of times when I see hooks there. So if you're gonna get a 3 millimeter hook, it's usually in like a generic set from like China, because you get a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6, and they don't have like half sizes a lot of times. So it would be very unlikely that you'd get a 4 1/4 there. So anyway, I think really that's all I have. If there are any last questions, you can throw those in the chat, and I'll see if I can answer those real quick. Otherwise, we'll probably wrap up for the evening. I have no idea what I'm going to stream on next week yet. We'll see if I go shopping this weekend and I buy a whole bunch of yarn. It is yarn like sale season right now, so if you want yarn, now's the time to get it from like Joann and Michaels, and all those places are having their like mega sales, because we're going into Christmas season, and so everyone's buying their yarn now for projects that they're making for Christmas. Once you actually get really close to Christmas, yarn sales are pretty terrible. All of the like product stuff will be on sale, but the like making things for people stuff will be off sale. Fleece is also crazy on sale. At least it has been at Joann Fabric. So yeah, the fleece, like I said, I got that Luxe fleece that I used on those blankets for, I think 60% off, and that's the biggest sale I've seen on that since it's come out. Somebody's asking, what's my preferred way to change colors when crocheting if I have to keep the color throughout, like stripes? So you can carry yarn up the side, but at least like with the scarf that I showed earlier, where I was working relatively thick stripes, I just prefer to cut it and sew in ends. I don't actually really mind sewing in ends. If you're making something like a gigantic blanket, and you're going to be doing like lots of thin stripes, then you're probably going to want to carry it up the edge. The problem with carrying up the edge is that you have to always get back to that side before you switch colors. So you can't work, like, as you work this way and then turn and you work back across. And if you end your yarn here, you can't work a single row or 3 rows and end up over here, because your yarn that you need to pick up is on this side. So you're either going to end up having to cut, or you're going to have to work another row to get you back to here so that you can bring your yarn up to the side. So if you're working short color changes, like a mosaic type of crochet, or like I did a little stuffed giraffe that you had to work like the spots, and so you had to do like 5 stitches of yellow, and then 3 stitches of brown, and then 5 stitches of yellow, and then 2 stitches of brown. Those you carried the yarn with you and hid it inside the stitches, and that works really well for that type of project. But if you're doing long stripes, you're just gonna waste yarn if you're just carrying it for 2 whole rows back and forth. Then you just bring it up the side. I don't have a video on how to carry yarn up the side, but there are tons of them out there if you're struggling to picture how that works. I think generally if you carry yarn up the side, you're going to want to do a border of some sort around the outside to hide all of your carries up the edges. And then you also want to give yourself enough slack on the outside. If you carry it and you don't give yourself enough room, you'll have a little bit of trouble blocking, if that's something you're going to have to do. So if you're striping like a shawl and you need to carry along the edges, if you're going to block it, you need to leave yourself enough slack there that it's going to block, but not so much that it loops on the edges. So it's a little bit of balancing act, but those are your options. Either cut and sew in your ends, or carry it either with you or up the edges. So as far as my preferred way, I generally cut yarn unless it's the short color changes like I was talking about, where you're going to be switching back and forth rapidly. I don't tend to carry yarn up the edges of a project. I don't really know why. It's not a bad idea. It's just, it's not something I tend to do. So yeah, that's sort of a long answer to what could have been a quick question. But with that being said, I am going to wrap up for the evening. So I hope to see you guys all back here next week. We'll stream on something. If anyone has any ideas, shoot them my way at on Facebook or Instagram at Experiments in Crafting, or you can comment in the comment section below. The video takes a little while to process, but then it should be available and you can comment on it or send me a direct message or whatever you'd like to do. Otherwise, I will hopefully see you all back here next week. Have a good rest of your week and good night. Thanks for watching.